Well, the number one role of every board is to bring a combination of three things. Oversight, which of course is good governance and best practices in governance. Insight, and that's insight into the business itself, into the landscape in general, the competitive landscape, or how things are changing. And foresight, which is really about looking ahead, looking to the future. So really, I think a great director and a great set of directors balance those three things very well, understanding that they have a different role to play than management. As I like to say, we're on the same team, but we do play different positions. And I think particularly in times like this, when things are very turbulent, it can be a difficult quarter. It can be difficult to make the quarter's results. And the management team are very focused on that. The role of the board is to sort of, keep the altitude at the correct level, continue to think about the longer term, continue to think about where is there opportunities in this turbulence to perhaps focus on different investments, look at different M&A opportunities, and kind of just to balance a little bit of the short-term focus that management teams can find themselves defaulting into when times are indeed very choppy, very turbulent and difficult, but always trying to keep that balance between the short and the long term. One of the exciting things for boards right now, post the pandemic, is to really think about how do we want to leverage everything we've learned about how we do our jobs over the last few years as we look ahead. I mean, in many respects, we're now almost a quarter, into the 21st century. And yet, if we're very honest, a lot of boards were operating prior to the pandemic the way we did in sort of the last quarter of the last century, meeting 4 times a year, sitting in the same room, sometimes in the same seat. And that's not really commensurate with the way business operates today. So I think the onus is on us as directors who are interested in sort of really preparing businesses for the future that we're facing into, to think about how we need to change how we operate. How can boards govern in a way that is commensurate with digital businesses? How can we operate in a way that is commensurate with the needs, the feeds, and the speeds of business today? And quite simply getting together 4 times a year to look at last quarter's results and sort of everything that's lagging about that just doesn't seem to be in keeping with the speed at which business is operating right now. So I think the very best boards are not just defaulting back to how we operated before the pandemic, but rather are designing forward. So we now know that through the use of technologies, there's things that we can do asynchronously and provide updates in really rich ways. There are meetings that we can hold virtually, so that you're preserving that in-person time for the really strategic conversations, for the really meaty topics, and really sort of spending that quality time together. So I think that's one big difference that the most proactive, forward-looking boards are thinking about. We also have a real responsibility to all stakeholders, and that's a much broader set of people now with much higher expectations. So I think the very best boards make their decisions in the context of all stakeholders, and again, are proactively thinking about the types of issues that matter to each of those groups, and are not leaving themselves in a point of vulnerability where the company is appearing tone deaf to anything, or is on sort of their back heel relative to responding to anything that might be happening beyond the 4 walls of the organization. What diversity actually does for you. I like to remind people that diversity is the answer to a problem. It's not a problem in and of itself that we have to go and fix. When you have diverse skills, backgrounds, experiences, and perspective around the table, you simply have a much sort of broader aperture for looking at the problem. So when you bring directors with diverse perspectives and backgrounds around the table, you are gathering a broader set of opinions. You're able to debate a topic with a far greater degree of depth and richness. You don't fall into groupthink nearly as much. And if you get it right, you really can find a boardroom where you are reflecting the richness and the diversity of the customers that you're serving and the employees that work in your organization as well. I think sometimes people forget the impact that it can have on employees to look up at the upper echelons of the organization, whether that's the management team or the board. And when they see diversity, when they see people that look like them, it tells them that this is a place where they can have a great career, where they can have a future, where somebody like them is around the table, has a voice, is in the room, and their perspective is being heard and being shared. Great boards as well, I think, are very proactive in how they are thinking about things. You don't want to find yourself in a defensive crouch. You don't want to find yourself kind of defensively reacting to the circumstances around you. You really want to be out in front of as many things as possible. And while none of us could probably predict a global pandemic and get out in front of that, there are things you can do, of course, to think about the resilience of your business. I think companies that were focused a great deal on the future of work and we're already looking at hybrid work locations, different use of technologies, employee well-being. All of these were themes that were in existence before the pandemic, but the pandemic certainly accelerated all of that. So boards are going to find themselves with a lot to grapple with, but I think it's a very exciting time to really figure out how to optimize on these opportunities, to be as proactive as you can, and of course then to balance those three things of good oversight, good insight, and great foresight. CEOs that get the most value out of their boards look at their board as being a strategic asset to the organization. I remember one CEO I worked with said the best thing any CEO can do is put the best team below him or her and the best team above him or her. And that's the board. So if you're a CEO or a leader and your board is anything less than a strategic asset, you've got the wrong board, or you're not leveraging your board fully. Your board should be a set of terrific minds and like I said, diverse perspectives and experiences who come together to think about the most important issues affecting your organization. This is a group of deeply invested, deeply committed people who'll do anything to help you. And while I said we do play different positions, we are ultimately on the same team. So there's a lot of leverage that can be gotten from a really great board. Finally, I would say, don't hesitate to think about where your board could be hugely accretive when it comes to big accounts or big customers. So again, I've sat in, coming out of the financial services industry, I've sat in on executive briefings or client briefings with some of our big customers coming out of financial services. It's helpful because I do have some context for perhaps what the client is saying that I can share with the team afterwards. Or moreover, it shows the client that, wow, I must really be an important account to this organization because they've asked somebody on the board to sit in on this briefing. So clearly it matters to the company, and that's a good thing for any client to see and hear. So there's lots of different ways in which you can leverage and engage and activate your board outside of your quarterly board meetings. And I think you'll find most directors are very willing and able to do a lot of this and can be hugely accretive and great contributors in all these different respects when they are leveraged correctly. And that's how you end up with a great board, not just a good board, and a board that truly is a strategic and valuable and competitive advantage for your company.